As we wait, Baraka, maybe you tell us what Mtoto News is all about.
So actually it's children's information.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get back. We started streaming on Facebook. I'll come back to you.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah, so I think since we're live on Facebook, it's time for us to start. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this month's session of Inquisitive. Inquisitive is a session we host monthly or bi-monthly at Color, where we seek to get information on different sectors of society, on digital matters, on trends and whatnot, and we get different experts to talk about them. And this evening, we are privileged to have two amazing Kenyans who are doing well in their respective fields, amazing speakers, but also really amazing human beings. We have Grace Githaiga and we have Ali Hussein Kasim. I'm just going to ask them to say a quick hello, tell us a bit about themselves, their journey so far, and where they are now. So, Ali, you look amazing, but I'm going to go with women first. Is that okay?
That's okay. Please proceed.
Grace, let's proceed. You're muted, so you may want to unmute yourself.
All right. My name is Grace Githaiga. I convene the Kenya ICT Action Network, kicked on it, which is a policy and regulatory platform that contributes to ensuring that the policies and the laws that are, being produced or those that already exist have a public interest perspective. We also recognize the need for regulation, but we also insist that regulation needs to be balanced by our rights as espoused in Article 4 of our Constitution. So for now, I will just leave it at that. In response to data minimization. Thank you.
Baraka, you're on mute.
Classic. Grace, you talked about a particular article in the Constitution. What article is that again?
It's article for the Bill of Rights. It's in the Bill of Rights. Yeah.
So chapter 4 of the Constitution. Okay.
Sorry, chapter 4. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Baraka. You wanted an introduction.
Yes, just tell us who you are. Yeah.
Thanks, Baraka, and great to see Grace. I think Ali Hussein is my name. I chair the Kenya ICT Action Network Board of Trustees. I am also the founding chair of the Association of Fintechs in Kenya. And I also sit on the executive board of the Africa Fintech Network, which is an umbrella body of about 35 fintech associations across Africa. I'm also a tech entrepreneur, and I sit on other boards. But my passion has always been to ensure that the private sector, especially in the tech space, get involved in policy and regulatory matters. My mantra has always been that, and this is an example I always like to give, rather an analogy I always like to give in gatherings like this. If you walk into a restaurant and you are not part of the conversation, you're sitting at the restaurant, at a restaurant table, you have three options. Number one, you are sitting at the table with others and ordering food and eating, whether it's lunch, breakfast, or dinner. Number two, you are the waiter who is serving people. If you're not number one or number two, you are in serious trouble. But number one is the best to be in. But at least you are number two, unasikia maneno kidogo.
Yeah.
But if you are number three, it means you are on the menu being eaten. That's policy and regulatory matters. So I keep on telling my friends and my colleagues in the tech space, it's more than coding today. It's more than ensuring that you keep your lights on, in your offices. It's about disruption today is not just about new business models coming to disrupt or new technologies coming to disrupt. You can wake up one morning and find yourself that you've been disrupted by regulation. Case in point, a few years back, we killed the ICT practitioners bill. We now see it back in Parliament. How many of us are actually engaging? Are we fatigued? And, I just want to pose these very serious questions to people, Kenyans and Africans at large, that we are the bosses. We are the ones that these policies are being made for. If politicians are sitting in Parliament and making laws because they think they're in the metaverse and nobody else is engaging with them, we are the ones who have to answer to ourselves because they are there because we elected them. So it's all great to talk about all these newfangled technologies that are coming in. But if you are in the AI sector, for example, and you have no clue what the regulatory and policy implications of artificial intelligence are, you're going to wake up one morning and realize you've been making this AI stuff for yourself and your kids. Thanks, Baraka. I think that's enough for now.
That's great, and what a fantastic intro. And Ali, let me just pick up on that. We're talking about tech trends to look out for in 2022. But let's talk about 2021 first. And you mentioned that you lead a couple of fintech organizations and sit on different boards. As far as Kenya is concerned, how was last year in terms of the fintech fair? How did it fare last year? Was it a good year?
It's an okay year. It was an okay year because we have quite a lot more startups coming up, but we're doing very badly when it comes to the policy and regulatory space because we are in limbo, and hence one of the key reasons why we have founded the Association of Fintechs in Kenya, with actually the help of the Kenya ICT Action Network, because in 2019, when the Kenya ICT Action Network does quite a lot of work on the policy side. And if you want to see some of the work that we've done, you can go to the Kictanet website, kictanet.or.ke, and you can see all the downloads. So we did a policy brief, the first ever policy brief on fintechs anywhere in Africa. And by the way, the same Kictanet did a policy brief on the blockchain before the blockchain a task force was formed. And one of the key things that we found during that study is that the policy and regulatory framework is evolving so fast that industry players must engage. And when industry players engage, then the right policies and regulations will be founded. Now, one thing that I want to correct people and make people understand is that fintech does not equate to digital lending alone. Digital lending is a small component of fintech. Within fintech, there is wealth tech, there is Regtech, there is blockchain, there is payments, there is wealth, real estate tech. There is it's a wealth of. This whole industry is becoming literally the engine that moves the internet economy space. So it's critical that the players within these industries engage meaningfully with regulators and policymakers. So
social media front, we actually saw many social media platforms gain traction. So apart from the traditional Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, then we actually saw that TikTok gained traction in Kenya digital users, especially with the young users, and some of the young users going on to benefit, in fact, financially, just from using TikTok. So that's one of the things that one of the gains are during 2021. I think in terms of regulation, Huduma number, in terms of Huduma number, there was a court ruling that found government implementation of the Huduma number was actually undertaken without conducting a data impact assessment. And so they were found to have been in violation of the Data Protection Act. I think one of also the major things that we saw was the Office of the Data Commissioner actually was able to come up with data protection regulations, which were actually published and called for public participation, and different stakeholders participated. And so they've actually been now, and they were recently gazetted. And, there is also that final approval from Parliament. Another thing that we found, and which is going to be key this year, is actually that political parties were found to have illegally registered citizens as members of their party. And that has actually been reported to the Office of the Data Commissioner. And so, that will be one of the key areas that we will be looking out to as a trend in this election year. And I think finally what I want to say is that we saw also a lot of politicians utilizing digital platforms to share their manifestos, to campaign, to share disinformation, because there was a lot of disinformation and misinformation going on, where there was that deep fakes that would show a politician in a rally with massive crowds, but which really were not the true portrayal of the real scenes. And I think I want to stop there. There were many, but there was one that I need to mention, and that is that there was the launch of the NC4, that is the National, the National Committee, anyway, Cyber Committee and Coordination Committee that was envisaged in the Cyber Crimes Act of 2018, that then is tasked with, providing that broader cybersec direction. And I think that was quite key. Yeah.
So Grace, where do we stand now with the Huduma numbers? Because my chief keeps on calling me to come for my card, and I don't know if I'm going to be deported. Where do we stand on that?
I think, I see somebody's already responding with, okay. Yeah, National Cybersecurity Coordination. Thanks so much for the committee. Sometimes I keep forgetting. I think recently there was a response to the fact that there was a response to producing that data protection assessment, impact assessment actually was presented. And what I know is that I haven't followed to find out where things are at, but there was a response from the government.
Yeah, I think also what you mentioned on that there was a lot of social media growth last year. The increase of people advertising on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok also grew quite a bit, YouTube as well. And you've seen more and more young people move to that digital space. However, also last year was the year we implemented digital tax in the country.
Oh, yes.
What has been the feedback on that from your perspective?
I think that there's need to, KRA is actually, the way KRA is doing it, it actually demonstrates lack of understanding on how the digital realm operates. And maybe Ali is better placed to comment on that. But, there's a tax. It doesn't show what, for example, how much, if you make that amount of money, how much should you pay? Is there, there isn't a scaled way of doing it. And it also needs to exempt some people, because the fact that you have a Facebook, that you have 5,000 followers, and like you advertise, you went to Naivasha and you were at some posh hotel there, and they think that you have money. It just shows that there's a lack of understanding on how this should be done. But I am not an expert in this area. Maybe Ali needs to comment on that.
I follow Ali on Instagram. He's an expert, yes.
Yeah.
On a light note, that that story that went round about KRA tracking you about your lifestyle. We have the sponsor culture here in this country. So how are you going to be tracking? But I think Grace is right. One thing for certain is that the digital tax conversation is not new. It is something that happened in the US sometimes back. It's now a conversation in Europe. One thing that I always want to say is that we must follow the same sort of parameters when it comes to tax. No problem with people paying their fair share of tax in this country or anywhere else. But what it must be seen is we must be seen to be equitable. The stakeholders must be engaged. And here is the other problem that we have, the endemic problem that we have in this country, where we have a new constitution that stipulates a number of things. For example, public participation. But then it is simply quiet about how that public participation is supposed to be implemented.
Yeah.
So what has happened is that certain government officials still think we're in the Kanu era, where they're just talking at us, as opposed to us having a conversation. I want to say something that may be a little bit controversial, but I want to say it anyway, because I think fundamentally we are at a situation that Kenyans and Africans as a whole must address the relationship between themselves and the government that they elect. So my dad used to be a civil servant working for the Mombasa City Council then. And there's a story he told me. And he told me, during our days, when citizens write to us, we responded within 7 days. And when you responded, you signed off, "I remain your servant, sir." That's a civil servant writing to the citizen. And then my dad said something that was very fundamental for me. He's like, you see, the problem today is that civil servants are neither civil nor are they servants. That was profound for me. And that started my journey around engaging in policy and regulatory work. And I have absolutely zero apologies to make when I engage with policymakers and regulators in a respectful manner and telling them, my friend, you must talk to us. You must engage us. And that's the essence of who we are at Kictanet. Now, it's interesting that we are talking about technology stuff, and yet we're spending so much time around policy and regulatory work. Because let me tell you, so if you look at the work from home or work from anywhere conversation today, that's technology driven. Yeah. And that's driven by COVID. COVID has forced us to rethink how we engage. So companies are finding themselves in a dilemma and finding themselves that they must deal with young people who are saying, wait a minute, for me to be seen to work and produce does not mean that I must clock somewhere physically. It means that you must see my output. You don't necessarily have to see my input, because these days, everybody is all over the place, working at Java, working at home, working in the office. So all these technologies that are helping us really, really move forward. Case in point, when you're talking about I had a very interesting story the other day about one brand. I asked whether I could use the name, but they said not for now. One of the brands, the restaurant brands, they found themselves at a situation where they had so much food that they could not translate groceries and stuff. They could not translate into food because guys were not coming to the restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they do? They started a supermarket or a greengrocer.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have all these fulfillment companies, Glovo, Sandy, Uber Eats. And all of a sudden, Kenyans have found themselves seamlessly moving between the offline and the online world, completely seamlessly. You can order at home, you can decide, let us drive to the restaurant. So the new term, it's not really new, but it's now coming into focus, is the tech around omnichannel. So how do brands ensure that when Grace engages with them offline or Grace engages with them online, it is the same Grace Gidaiga. It is not Grace 1 and Grace 2.
Yeah.
That tech that is making people and brands become completely engrossed in both the off and online world, we then brings another component of fintech that's known as embedded finance. In its simplest form, embedded finance simply means that when I am on, say, the Uber platform, and I want to make a payment, I do not need to come out of the Uber platform and use my credit card or use M-Pesa. Everything is completely embedded into that. Now, the possibilities of that are absolutely immense and amazing, because one of the key problems we have today is from a user experience perspective. And Baraka, if you follow my conversations, you know my gripe around user experience. I am talking about it almost every other day.
Completely.
So these new sort of technologies are becoming completely important and embedded in our lives without us realizing what it's all about. One last thing I want to say is on what is known as Regtech, regulatory technology. And you are finding very interesting stuff happening. Just a few days ago, I posted something around Binance. I don't know whether Binance is the largest crypto exchange in the world. Those guys are doing like $24 billion every day worth of crypto trades.
Wow.
Every day. So last week, they restricted a number of Nigerian accounts, and they said they were doing KYC, ML, CTF, PEP, So for those who may not understand what I've just talked about, KYC, know your customer, ML, anti-money laundering checks. CTFs is counterterrorism enforcement. PEPs is politically exposed persons. And governments are starting to realize, you know what? We can't fight this thing. This crypto thing has completely gotten central bankers all over the place worldwide, not just in Kenya and Nigeria. They're saying, you know what? Let's see what we can do within a regulatory framework. And that has become now mainstream. Before, it was the periphery of techies sitting in their rooms in pajamas and trading crypto 24/7 and eating junk food and stuff like that. Now every Tom, Dick, and Harry is talking about crypto. Now there are positives and there are negatives. And we must find a way to ensure that people are protected, while at the same time, you're not going to stop the growth of technology. It's like trying to stop 100,000 ton train coming next to you, coming to you. You have two options, my friend. Rather three: get on the train, get crushed, or step aside.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you,
like
brother.
that you always speak in threes. I've heard before that if you're not at the dinner table, you're on the menu. And I learned from you can also be the waiter. So that's an amazing perspective. But let's talk about NFTs and the whole Bitcoin and crypto conversation later. At least I'll come back to you. But for Grace, moving forward, what do you think 2022 has in store for Kipternet and the whole ICT sphere?
I think, Baraka, I want to speak from what we do, and that is from a policy perspective. And actually, you're right, the work that we do. And I think I just want to speak about four areas. One is on data and privacy concerns. Recently, I think on January 28th, the Office of the Data Protection launched its strategic plan, which means now that office has a roadmap on data protection and how they're going to do things. So what we have actually seen is data is key. It continues to be key in a lot of things. And many companies have actually started using data to make decisions. This does raise greater risks to privacy. For example, when you shop online or you have a meal at Java or other restaurants, and you pay using your credit card or M-Pesa, when you get home, there's usually this text message that asks you to evaluate. Yes, the service, their service. And what that means is that they actually have your profile with them. So it's going to be interesting to just see how they continue to use that message. I mean, your profile, considering that the Data Protection Commissioner is very clear on being sent unsolicited messages. So now that she has a strategy, we want to see whether she's going to bite. So, and then in her remarks on that on the World Data Protection Day, she indicated that she had already received over 400 complaints, mainly on digital lenders and on political parties' registration where they found themselves registered. And she said she'd already dispensed with over 200. Now that her office has a roadmap, and last week advertised, is doing a massive hiring and has already been provided with a decent budget and support from even development partners. I think it will be interesting this year to see how that office will engage with Wananchi and vice versa. Will that office bite, especially of those accused of data and privacy breaches? And in particular, this being an election year, how will that office respond to privacy and data breaches by politicians? Because if we follow the trend we have received, previously, there's a lot of unsolicited messages from MCA guys from your area, and you don't even know how they know you live in that area, people who are vying for member of parliament. So it would be interesting to see that. Now, linked to that, I want to speak to the
Let me ask this just before you move on. Does the office have the capability? Do they have the jaws to bite? Or is it just a suggestion?
You actually said we are looking at trends to watch. That is one of the things that we will be watching now that the office has standards of practice, a strategic plan. There's going to be recruitment, so the office is going to be well resourced. There's a provision of kind of decent budget. So how will that? I think we will be waiting to see, and we are observing how that office will operate. I think the second thing that is very critical in this year is how technology, use of technology for elections. Now, this being an election year, and I guess more so a transition one where the incumbent will not be vying, is quite interesting. In 2013, 2017, we know that tech was proposed and actually was used. And if you remember the Vifaranga via computer, it just showed there was a lot of awareness on tech use during elections. No, so tech is key in mitigating rigging. But, is it yesterday we got to learn of an elections amendment bill 2022. And there's a proposal by IEBC to change the election laws as pertains to transmission of presidential results. So the proposed changes are to allow for both electronic and physical transmission. In fact, I think I saw Albert Gashiri saying that if you want to tally the results, you need to go to the portal yourself and do the calculation. So the question to ask here is, why do we want to do away with live transmission? Why don't we want to utilize optimal technology to be able to provide results as they come? What is the exact motive? And so it's interesting because we'll be looking at how will this influence like future of use of technology in elections. So is it, are we in a situation where it will be a case of one step forward and 2 or 3 steps backwards? The third area I want to handle is on cybersecurity, and what we have realized is that COVID-19 pandemic has actually highlighted the importance of digital technologies. We have seen people from all over the world becoming more connected as a result of developments in technology. There's an increase in digital communications tools that are enabled by the internet, and the adoption of digital technologies has also seen an increase in cybersecurity threats and risks. So, what that means is that with more people coming online, there are more attacks. And there's also a rise in, for example, stealing of critical data, such as user information on credit card details, username, passwords, and so on. So in addition, I think we were given a statistic that, the total threats detected by the Kenya SAT, that's the Cyber Security Incident Response Team, have actually grown from 2018, when you look at the statistics, to about 2020, there's actually a major rise, like from 23 million to about 20 million in 2020. So what does this portend for ordinary users? What does this portend for companies? Considering that companies are now most of them are moving online, they're using data. What then needs to be in place, and how does the regulator, or how will the regulators respond? I spoke about one of the key, what happened in last year. And so, the launch of the National Computer and Cybercrimes Coordination Committee, NC4, which was envisaged in the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act of 2018. So 2018 was launched. So this NC4 is tasked with strengthening the detection, investigation, and prosecution of cybercrimes. But in a recent Gazette notice, actually this week, of January 31st, 2021, The NC4, we saw designated critical sectors and services it regards as critical infrastructure. And those include data, they include voice and communication, internet connectivity, domain and IP management, and so on. So,
payment gateways.
Yes. So, an interesting trend to look into. It will be interesting to see how the NC4 will play a role in all this, considering number one, it had no role in establishment of all those it wants to control. Number two, it has not involved the players in those sectors in line with Article 10 of the Constitution, where you need public participation, where you're making public policy. But also it has not produced its own guidelines or regulations to guide its engagement with stakeholders. And so, and yet it is expected to lead in the security strategy, which is up for renewal. So it will be interesting to look at how stakeholders will engage, whether stakeholders will demand for a risk assessment on the previous cybersecurity, and basically how Ali indicated this. How are stakeholders going to demand for accountability? That's something to watch, because you're already seeing that eating into some of the space that really it doesn't, again, there's a demonstration that there may be lack of understanding on how some of these sectors work. And finally, I want to speak about the issue of access and affordability for ordinary communities. I think this is a conversation that has been ongoing for so long, but and use of emerging technology. So last year, like community networks. So last year, the Communications Authority, together with other stakeholders like Kictanet, actually contributed and which sought to, there's a result of a licensing and shared spectrum framework for community networks. And so, the regulator has actually released the guidelines, the application forms, the compliance forms, the fees that people need to pay. So it will be interesting to see if ordinary people will capitalize on this openness from the regulator and put in the application, or whether people want to continue operating or providing what we call in the mtaa as internet mwitu, whether those forms of provisions will continue to thrive, or Kenyans will capitalize on this openness. And finally, I would like my chair, Ali, to comment on the whole issue of metaverse, because there's some news we saw last night about them losing 250,000 of users in the last final of 2021, and that is like the first time in 17 years. Of its operation. So I think it will be interesting to just, that is something we cannot avoid to look at. Yes, I think this is something that is one of us will be watching. It's big news. Thank you. I think I want to end there. Thanks.
Ali, what's your take on the metaverse news? You're also on mute.
I'm sorry. First, let's deal with what the metaverse is. There is so much that has been talked about around the metaverse. But in a nutshell, basically the metaverse is a convergence of two ideas that are not new. Really, they are not new. And I remember 7-8 years ago being in Second Life. Did you ever dabble in Second Life, Baraza? It was a game. That was an online game that you went in, you got an avatar, you bought real estate, you engaged literally in an online life that was like
almost real,
separate. Almost real, but separate from you. So it's convergence of these two ideas, virtual reality and a digital second life. Now, During the Second Life hyper time, guys literally quit their jobs and started living their lives on Second Life. Lawyers who provide services in Second Life get paid with some digital tokens and coins. We had never heard about the blockchain and crypto then, but there was some form of, digital payments. And at some point, guys were actually exchanging those digital tokens with actual real dollars. Now, what I want to caution people is that don't do that in the metaverse. Bado. Double in it. It's something I keep on telling executives and people that I work with. We took a ground it different. Do not wait and listen to third parties telling you about things. Get in yourself. Invest some time. Sometimes invest a little bit money. The metaverse, everyone is getting into it. Microsoft recently acquired, what's this company called? Activision for about $69 billion. And one of the motivations was the metaverse. Now, are we going to see some interesting stuff happening this year as far as the metaverse is concerned? Well, Meta, aka Facebook, will probably want us to believe that would be. And probably they may release an MVP, a minimum viable product. But it will take a bit of time. What I want to tell people and what I want to emphasize is that do not say it's not going to happen, because that's, the history is littered with people who ignored technology. The horse cart guys were wondering what is this thing that is moving without horses. I don't know whether you guys saw the latest Mercedes ad video that is going around celebrating 100 years of Mercedes. So this lady is driving in the first motor vehicle this village has ever seen. The minute she drives into that village, everybody took off. The witch is here. The witch is here. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy. So, but stepping back a bit and looking at Meta, aka Facebook, they've just released those numbers. For the first time in 18 years, the number, not growth has slowed down, because these big tech companies is always about growth slowing down. To this time, they have dipped in daily active users, which is a very key metric in the social media circle. Guess what happened? They lost 25% market cap. That's $200 billion worth of wealth wiped out in one day. Now, you want to step back a bit and ask yourself what has been building up towards this situation. Now, Facebook today talks about privacy, like they literally invented privacy. But a few years back, the founder was literally quoted as saying privacy is overrated. And privacy was overrated at that time because people didn't really realize what was going on. Who told you, Baraka, to post on your on your status, relationship, it's complicated. Who told you? Anybody force you to do that?
Nope.
Move it from single to now in a relationship or married or stuff like that. Now, I'm big on analogies, as you may have noticed. You know, social media is an interesting space to be in. You can't avoid it. Even if you avoid it, somebody is talking about it on social media. Mm-hmm. So the internet today is another line. But one thing you must appreciate is when you're on these platforms like Facebook, these platforms are 4 key principles: a buyer, a seller, a product or service being sold, and the platform itself. Those are 4 key components. Now, if you're not a buyer, if you're not the seller, and you're not the platform, what are you?
The product.
The product. Now, the minute you appreciate and understand that, and that's why now every other country has a data protection commissioner. These data protection commissioners are like the mineral commissioners of before, because that's data. We keep on talking about data is a new oil. I'm not sure whether we really appreciate what that actually means in dollar terms. You want to look at the top 5 companies in the Fortune 500 list today. One way or another, they're dealing in data. They are purveyors of data. And whose data is that? Mine, Grace, yours, and our audience here today. Right? So when we are now starting to talk about the metaverse, we have actually a great opportunity to start asking yourself, are you going to repeat the same mistakes that we did with Web 2.0? Because now we're talking about Web 3. Yeah, Web 3 is all about blockchain, is all about crypto, is all about control of my data, right? So we are moving. And you know, the situation that we are in today is, it took 20 plus years for radio and TV to become, to hit critical mass. Mm. Today, from zero to critical mass in some cases is 2-3 years. Mm. I mean, look at TikTok. I mean, it's absolute crazy. And you can say it's a fad. It may be a fad, but what if it's not? Mm. And utawacha kwa mata. So you want to have a strategy where you are absolutely aware what is going on and what it means for me and my business, myself individually, my kids around me, and craft strategies to ensure that what you comment on.
Let me ask you, Ali, as we almost bring this to a close. Yes. 2022 is going to be an election
year. Yes.
One of the things we've seen a lot on social media is that you have lots of people breaking news fast before conventional media, right? So, for example, if I'm at a poll station and they announce the winner, I may announce it first before NTV or Royal Media or anyone gets this information. Is there a way to control that? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Recently, we've seen on the expose about bodies on Henry Vayala. And so there's been a lot of those sort of like new, don't want to say new journalists, but there's a lot of new stuff out there.
You know, the other day I posted something about the DCI handle on Twitter. I don't know that you saw that on my LinkedIn.
The storytelling.
And the storytelling. These guys are catching up. They're catching up. You see, first let us agree that cat is out of the bag. That horse has bolted the stable. Mm. You are not going to stop, irrespective of what you do. it's like that head of Medusa, you know, you cut one snake, another one grows.
Yep.
You know, that cat is out of the bag. I think what we as citizens must do is ensure that we hold our politicians and our civil servants, we hold them responsible for ensuring that we have a free and fair election, and that people's rights to speech, to freedom of speech, are absolutely respected within limits, of course, you know, within limits. What we must ensure is that national security is maintained. But here's the problem about national security. National security is such an amorphous thing that a human being who's just like me decides today it is national security. And you find yourself in the cells and you ask yourself, because I'm inside, because I have said something about a politician that somebody doesn't like. Now, we have to, again, as Grace said, we have to be vigilant. But telling Kenyans or asking Kenyans to not report, where is the law against that? Where is the law against that? The last resort is the issue of shutting down the internet. And we have seen that happening in a lot of African countries. Are we going that route? God forbid that we get there, because then we have a situation where we can hardly control. But we hope that the powers that be do not resort to that level of clamping down on people's rights.
Great. Ali, there's some questions coming in for you, so I'm going to ask you to answer them. But as you do so, Grace, we're going to just bring it to a close real quick. So I'm going to ask you what you're looking forward to as far as 2022 is concerned, what excites you, but also what scares you as far as this is concerned. But before we get back to Grace, let's finish up with Ali. So Ali, we have Sheila Tenui saying she's an ardent follower of yours on LinkedIn. She'd like you to shed light on the following. One, the data privacy case, the example of Rubies. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And then second,
I'm familiar with the Rubies issue.
And then the second one is really what we talked about earlier, the digital tax by KRA and how it affects e-commerce. So maybe I can split them in two. I'll ask you, Ali, to talk about the data privacy case, and then I'll ask Grace to talk about digital tax by KRA and its effects on e-commerce.
So, Sheila, I may not have a full answer on the data privacy case because this is a case that is still ongoing, right? And for me, I think it's going to be a watershed moment on data privacy. And I'm really hoping that the data commissioner is following that story very, very closely. How that will end is anybody's guess. But one thing that I like to say without accusing anyone on either side, number one, when you're doing due diligence, when you're buying a company, when you're doing due diligence, it is incumbent upon the buyer to do full due diligence. Okay? Now, this case is around the fact that some information was not disclosed. Now, is it the buyer's responsibility to ensure all information is disclosed? Or is it the seller's responsibility? And the answer is a little bit of both. We are now entering the sphere of, I'm trying to find the right word here, ethics. That's the right one, ethics, right? If you come to me at my farm and I tell you that this cow is 2 years old. It's a heifer, only calved once. You have the responsibility as a buyer to confirm that, and there are ways to confirm it. If you don't, and I have said it's 2 years old, Kumba it's 5 years old, whose responsibility is it? Okay. Ethically, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
All right. But is it wrong by law?
No.
Exactly.
You can, there's a way you can get away.
That's, for me, that's the essence of the Rubis case. Okay. I mean, this is a multinational telling us they have been hoodwinked, surely. You know, what is going on here? Who was doing this due diligence? So that case will be decided as it is decided. I'm not sure the digital tax by carrier. I'm not sure what Sheila wanted me to say, whether it's good or it's bad, or what digital tax by carrier for e-commerce. Sorry, what about that? I have not understood your question or comment, Sheila. Question.
Okay.
Maybe
so
you can. Maybe she can. Maybe Sheila can
elaborate a bit further.
Elaborate a bit, and then we can come back to it. But
there's her question. She wants to know the implication to e-commerce business, what the digital tax has, and what the implication is.
I think, Sheila, I think I mentioned this. And at this point, I believe components of the digital tax have been suspended. Is that correct, Grace? I think for Kenyan businesses, the digital tax currently only applies for the big boys, the Googles and the Facebooks and the rest of them. For the local business, the jury is still out on that. Maybe it may be brought back. I think the implications for e-commerce are, for me, they're neither good or bad. It's the cost of doing business. Ultimately, Caesar must have his piece of the pie, ultimately, right? So what we must do as stakeholders in the tech space is sit down in the Kenya Revenue Authority and the government and say, look, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we ensure that these are the parameters? We are just postponing the inevitable. This country and every other country in the world must expand the tax bracket. Unfortunately, for very long, very few people, a very small percentage of the population has been bearing the burden of tax for every other Kenyan. You know, the salaried employees. I hear people talking about my hustle. It's a business, my guy. If we want to use that term that people love, it's a business, my guy. Ultimately, you must pay your fair share of taxes. Let us not scut our responsibilities. We must do what must be done. Thank you.
Good. As we bring it to a close, and this final question for each of you, Grace, will start with you. What is it that excites you about 2022 in this tech space? What is it also that scares you or frightens you in this tech space for 2022?
I think let me start by what scares me. One is just that consistent flouting of the Constitution and some of the laws, for example, where public participation is necessary in policy making. We continue to see some of these government authorities breaching that. And that really scares me that 11 years after the Constitution was promulgated, that there's still some who continue to ignore that the Constitution is actually our basic governance tool in this country. So that really scares me, especially when you look at such cases like the Huduma number and maybe others that will come, considering this is an election year. But what excites me? some of the things that excite me is that as Kictanet, we actually did, like Ali indicated, the first policy brief on blockchain. So I get very excited every time I hear people talking about embracing blockchain for this or that. Recently, the Minister of ICT, the Cabinet Secretary for ICT, was actually on television saying that Huduma number is using blockchain. And I was like, wow, when we started talking about this, it just sounded like it was strange. So for me, the fact that we have been thought leaders, we have continued to shape some of these ICT policies is very exciting. I think the other area is on 5G. Again, we did do a 5G policy that got support from certain quarters and got opposition from certain quarters. But last year, we saw Safaricom saying, they're actually going to start using 5G. And these are some of the conversations that you can't avoid, because you can't be talking of artificial intelligence without thinking how that will be achieved. And 5G will be a factor in ensuring that is achieved. So it's encouraging that some of the things we said 2-3 years ago are now starting to bear fruit. So that for me is exciting.
Fantastic. Ali, what excites you? What frightens you about 2022? What frightens me is that your mic is off.
What frightens me really is the sometimes heavy-handed way that government treats its citizens. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to election year, it becomes a serious issue. We are always worried where we are going. We are always worried whether government will do the right thing. What I tell my fellow Kenyans is simply that tuko na power could decide which sort of government we will get going forward. And what we want is a government that is responsive to its citizens' needs. That really, really scares me about government when it comes to policy and regulatory matters, because sometimes you get the feeling that politicians just wake up and decide that they want to do X and X, and sometimes you wonder whether this is not rent-seeking policy and regulatory interventions. What excites me is the opportunities in this country and across the continent. Kenyans and Africans, we have such great opportunities ahead of us. Despite all the pitfalls that we have, we still are able to do business. We're still able to launch startups, both in the technology space and in the, in the normal business hemisphere. I think the thing that excites me a lot is that we now have some sort of small business administration within the government that will start looking at SMEs. We want to see a lot more engagement. Hence, organizations like the Digital Lenders Association, the Association of Fintechs, we're coming together and we are saying, this is a space we do business. This is a space we live in. We want to have a candid, honest, and open conversation about how these businesses, how policy will ensure that we actually grow. We don't want to continue having to say we grow despite the government. Mm-hmm. The government is supposed to serve us, and we are supposed to abide by the laws. We don't want to have situations where we have, lacunas of law that we are unable to know what is right and what is wrong. That's always a situation for a recipe for disaster. So despite it being an election year, I feel the excitement in the air. I feel when foreign investors are pouring so much money into Kenya, I look at it in a positive way. I know there's a lot of negativity going around. Oh, foreign money is coming in, but it's only funding foreign founded, companies. I say this to those naysayers. Why did those guys not start those businesses in South Africa? Why did they not start those businesses in New York? There's a reason for that. Nairobi is now the 35th ranked fintech hub in the world.
Wow.
Right? So when you are now a global hub, and unaanza nyef kwanza kusema you don't want global. The thing is, charity begins at home. I keep on telling guys, the day your rich uncle stops talking Mugunda in Kitengela or on Kiambu Road and start saying, okay, let me hedge my bets. How much do you need? I need $100,000. I need 10 million shillings to start my business. Okay. Chukua hii pesa, but can we put structures? Can we put governance to ensure that if I give you that 10 meter, you're not driving a Prado the next day?
Yeah.
Or moving from an SQ to Runda. Let us have those serious conversations. Excitement is in the air. Let us have reports that say $500 million has been invested in Kenyan startups. Oh, by the way, 20% of that money came from local investors. Mm-hmm. Let us have the government say, here is a sovereign fund focused on innovative, life-changing tech companies being born by Kenyans. So, my brother, my sister, I feel excitement in the air.
I love it. So it's not all gloom and doom. There's a lot of hope, a lot of positivity. I love the facts you've dropped. I think there's a lot of growth in terms of governance and policy, but also a lot of bright spark in the country. A lot of fintechs are doing stuff, and even just a lot of startups out there. And this is very inspirational. So thank you, Ali, for making time. Thank you, Grace. Thank you for all the insights, for the wisdom. Thank you for even being charter leaders in this sector and for doing such a great job. I know you're not civil servants, but you're both civil and you're servants. Ali, thank you for the analogies so much. I can't wait to tell people about what he does now. Thank you. Have a great weekend for everyone who's tuned in.
Thank you, guys.
Do this again next month. We'll let you know when and what time. But again, Ali, Grace, and everyone, asanteni sana.